It's a pleasure to be here with you in Japan today. I'm Londa Schiebinger, coming to you from Stanford University. Thank you for your interest in our work. I'm the John L. Hines Professor of History of Science and Director of the Gendered Innovations in Science, Health and Medicine, Engineering, and Environment. Today, I would like to discuss with you the results of Gendered Innovations Global Review of Sex, Gender, and/or Diversity Analysis in Research Policies of Publicly Funded Agencies. The project was carried out by Lillian Hunt at the Wellcome Trust in London and myself. We worked with a 14-person international advisory board with representatives from 6 continents. Dr. Miyoko Watanabe is a valued member of our advisory board. We reviewed 23 publicly funded granting agencies across 6 continents. By way of background, let me say, doing research wrong costs lives and money. Between 1997 and 2000, 10 drugs were withdrawn from the US market because of life-threatening health effects, and 8 of those showed greater severity in women. But doing research right can save lives and money. This is an analysis of the US Women's Health Initiative hormone therapy trial, which was a large government-funded trial done in the 1990s. And this analysis found that for each dollar spent, $140 were returned to US taxpayers in healthcare savings, and lives were saved. There were 76,000 fewer cases of cardiovascular disease, there were fewer breast cancers, and more quality-adjusted life years. The downside is that there were more osteoporotic fractures, but overall, it was a very useful study. So it's crucial to get research right from the very beginning. National research agencies are funded by taxpayer monies, and as such are responsible for promoting quality, relevant, and reproducible research that benefits everyone across all of society and safeguards the environment. Numerous studies have shown that integrating sex, gender, and/or diversity analysis into the design of research, where relevant, can lead to discovery and improved research methodology. To realize this potential, funding agencies have implemented policies for integrating this type of analysis into the grant proposal process. Since 2012, I have collected funding agencies' policies on the Gendered Innovations website. And as you know, beginning in 2003, the European Commission endorsed questioning systematically whether and in what sense sex and gender are relevant in the objectives and in the methodology of projects. Other publicly funded agencies quickly followed suit, with policies implemented at the Canadian Institutes of Health Research beginning in 2010, at the US National Institutes of Health in 2016, and in the German Research Foundation in 2020, and the Korean National Research Foundation in 2020, among others. The European Commission has strengthened its policy with Horizon 2020 in 2014, and again in Horizon Europe in 2020, and now requires that all proposals include the gender dimension or justify why it is not relevant. Funding agencies are but one of the 3 pillars of science infrastructure that need to coordinate policies to achieve excellence in science. So pillar 1 is the funding agencies here, and they can encourage integrating sex, gender, and/or diversity analysis at the beginning of research. Pillar 2 is peer-reviewed journals, and they increasingly include these policies at the end of research. The Lancet and Nature have both implemented such policies. And pillar number 3 is universities. Universities and research institutions are responsible for providing the expertise for this type of analysis to support research and to train the next generation. And as a university professor, I can say we need to do a better job. The goal of our study is to identify standard practices across global regions, tailored where necessary to country-specific cultures and regulatory landscapes. We also want to provide a roadmap for agencies that wish to develop quality policies and practices in this area. In our study, we invited 40 funding agencies across 6 continents to participate. 23 responded to our questionnaire and, importantly, provided evidence for each response. As part of this study, and I think this may be the most important part of our study, we developed a 5-part evaluation framework. And my talk today steps through these 5 parts. There's first the definition of terms. Part 2 is proposal guidelines for applicants. Part 3, instructions for evaluators. Part 4, training for applicants, evaluators, and staff. And part 5, evaluation of policy implementation. Overall, of the 23 agencies we reviewed, 1 achieved superior performance, 6 scored with excellence performance, 5 showed average performance, 2 needed some improvement, and 9 required improvement. All these scores are confidential. I will not report them here, nor will they be reported in the paper that we will be publishing. And here we see scores per questionnaire section by region. So best scoring, these are definitions of terms. These are our regions, Africa and the Middle East, Europe and Central Asia, so on and so forth. And people scored the best on the definitions of terms. And they scored the worst on having policies in place to evaluate their process, to evaluate the policies that have been implemented. So one issue is that some of our agencies funded all types of research, science, engineering, but some agencies fund exclusively biomedical and health research. But interestingly, we found no differences in their scores between these types of agencies. So it means that agencies can be successful in implementing these policies. Now let's look at our 5 sections in some detail. And I will explore key considerations for each part of our evaluation and highlight policies of leading edge agencies that may serve as models for others. Any examples I mention are on public websites. Nothing here is confidential. So the first step in policy development is clear definitions of terms. In this section, we evaluated whether the agency had clearly defined definitions for sex, gender, and then any other diversity or intersectional characteristics, such as age, socioeconomic status, ethnicity, race, that sort of thing. And then we also evaluated whether those definitions were easily found. Different countries have different axes of historical discrimination, and these will influence each agency's choice of diversity characteristics to prioritize. So where do we find some model definitions? For sex, you can find model definitions on the Gendered Innovations website. Since 2009, we have had expert groups that work to define these terms. So of course, I like our definitions. You can also find very good definitions on the Canadian Institutes for Health Research website, and for sex also on the National Institutes of Health. For gender, I do like the Gendered Innovations definitions. For diversity, these are less well defined. You can find ethnicity and race on the Gendered Innovations website. You can also find a good definition for intersectionality. And then I wanted to say that some agencies are moving now, a trend that we're beginning to watch is that some agencies are broadening from sex and gender analysis to include broader social dimensions. So some agencies are going to do equity, diversity, and inclusion as an umbrella rather than sex and gender. And that's very interesting, but very often people get confused when they talk about EDI, which is very big in the US and in Europe. I don't know about Japan, because that has focused on who is doing the research and not how the research is being done, meaning that special care will be needed to expand EDI to include research methodologies. But we also find broadening away from just the term sex and gender. If we look at the European Commission, they added in 2020 intersectional analysis in their gender dimension. The German Research Foundation started with sex, gender, and diversity on equal terms. And the US NIH has included age, which they term inclusion across the lifespan. So each agency can decide which categories are the most important for them. What we're concerned with is that they define them clearly, and those definitions are easy for applicants and reviewers to find. Part 2 of our study, proposal guidelines for applicants. Agencies take 4 basic approaches in their request for applicants to integrate sex, gender, and diversity analysis into their research proposals where relevant. So most encourage the applicants to integrate this type of analysis. Some flag the research areas where they expect this type of analysis. A few agencies, like the European Commission, require this type of analysis where relevant. And then a few only encourage it when speaking to the applicants, but they require evaluators to score this aspect. So the point here is that if the methodology does not consider all the relevant variables, it's not good research. So in our study, more points were awarded to funders who required sex, gender, and/or diversity analysis. However, we would like to test which of these 4 approaches actually gives you the best outcomes. In all cases, the where relevant is crucial. No agency asks for sex, gender, and/or diversity analysis in pure mathematics, for example, where no body of literature has established its relevance. But if this type of analysis is not relevant, agencies must require a justification. So agencies request this information in different ways, but here it's interesting to see that sex, gender, and diversity analysis is considered under the excellence criteria or intellectual merit criteria in the proposals. And this is practiced by the European Commission especially. So agencies provide instructions in different ways. And one thing that we were interested in is whether they ask for sex, gender, and/or diversity analysis in each stage of the research. So sex analysis or gender analysis, for example, isn't just one thing you do. It's important to integrate it when identifying the problem, when designing the research, collecting the data, analyzing the data, and disseminating the information. So this method can be found on the Gendered Innovations website, along with many other methods. So we were quite clear, and we scored on the fact that this type of analysis goes throughout the entire research process. Now, instructions to applicants, there's several ways that this information is given. Some agencies have checklists. Some agencies have key questions that the applicant should answer. Some agencies offer frequently asked questions, and some have a mandatory open-ended text box on the submission form where you are required to add this information. Okay, we move on now to part 3, instruction for evaluators. Evaluators are crucial to the success of these policies. As you know, the job of evaluators is to ensure that only the highest quality proposals are funded. To be successful, agencies must instruct evaluators to consider sex, gender, and/or intersectional analysis in each phase of the research process. So the Canadian Institutes for Health Research found that targeting applicants alone to adopt new research policies without also pressuring evaluators was not effective. And since 2018, the Canadian Institutes for Health Research has required evaluators to rate the quality of sex, gender, and/or diversity analysis as a strength, a weakness, or not applicable, and to provide a rationale for their rating along with recommendations to applicants for improvement. Instructions to evaluators should mirror those to applicants for consistency. An agency or sector heads must monitor the quality of evaluations. The Canadian Institutes for Health Research, for example, samples 5% of evaluator rationale for their sex, gender, and/or diversity analysis rating, and they check it for quality and appropriateness. Part 4 of our framework, training for applicants, evaluators, and staff. Sex, gender, and diversity analysis is not yet consistently part of university curricula in the natural sciences, medicine, and engineering. Until universities step up to the task, funding agencies need to fill this gap. Training should be the same for applicants, evaluators, and agency staff for consistency. And for large agencies, evaluators appreciate trainings tailored to their research sector. So the European Commission certainly does this. They give different trainings to the biomedical people, and they give different trainings to the computer science people, still different trainings to the marine science people, so that the training really fits the discipline. So agencies offer different forms of training. There's online courses, there's in-person virtual workshops with experts. I've done a lot of those. There's dedicated websites, booklets, videos, and the similar things. So the most comprehensive open access training to date is by the Canadian Institutes of Health Research and also the US National Institutes of Health. Each of these agencies provide online interactive courses on health, medicine, and biomedical research. The CIHR released 3 online courses in 2015, and these are on integrating sex and gender into biomedical research. It's on sex and gender in primary data collection with humans, and sex and gender analysis of secondary data from human participants. The NIH released its courses in 2020. They're many years in the making. They're excellent courses. And these are sex as a biological variable and the health of women and men, and experimental design, SABV and analysis, and research reporting. These are free and online, and anyone can use them. So agencies can coordinate and share trainings internationally. There's no need to duplicate these efforts except where specific cultural needs require a specific approach. Agencies can also coordinate with research institutions. So what is needed now, we have excellent, we have excellent trainings, and we need to evaluate those trainings. And one thing that CIHR, the Canadian Institutes for Health Research, found is that they built the evaluation of the course into the course itself by including a pre-test of knowledge on sex and gender analysis and a post-test. And they showed that 75% of participants gained knowledge. Now, still needed are online courses for engineering. We don't have them for mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, civil engineering, for CS, computer science, marine science, and so on and so forth. Now, the European Commission supported an expert group that I directed in 2011-13 and also 2018-20 to create case studies, which are trainings for these areas. And all of these materials are also on the Gendered Innovations website. And the German Research Foundation and NSERC in Canada, which is the Science and Engineering Agency, also have some beginning materials, but we need more in this area. This is where Japan could perhaps have an impact. Okay, on to our last section, the evaluation of policy implementation. Only 3 agencies in our study evaluated policy implementation. We strongly recommend that agencies develop an evaluation plan that parallels the policies to facilitate appropriate quantitative and qualitative evaluation. So needed is quantitative and qualitative evaluation. As I said, we need to know the number and proportion of grants that include sex, gender, and diversity analysis. CIHR in Canada found a significant increase over a decade from 2011 to 2019. They found that overall, in all of their grants, 83% did sex analysis and only 33% did gender analysis. The level of integration differed by sector. Again, this is the Canadian Institutes for Health Research. The lowest sector for them was biomedicine, and the highest sector where they had the most inclusion was clinical research. We also need evaluations that look at the quality of these proposals. The European Commission conducted a midterm evaluation of their Horizon 2020 in 2017. And among other things, they reviewed the quality of the gender dimension or gender analysis in about 1% of their 10,000 applications. They considered the methods, the impacts, the dissemination, and also whether the project moved gender analysis ahead in that field and could serve as a good practice. It's a very good evaluation. But overall, they concluded that the quality of the proposals was not high and that more training for applicants and evaluators was needed. Qualitative analysis also showed the conflation of the terms sex and gender at both the European Commission and the Canadian Institutes of Health Research. So number 3, we need evaluations. We need to evaluate the quality of reviewers' scoring and comments. In 2018, the Canadian Institutes for Health Research requires evaluators to rate the sex and gender aspect of the proposal and to provide a rationale for that rating or that grade. They sampled 5% of these evaluations to check the quality of their reviewers. And this analysis was all done by hand. The European Commission also reviewed the effectiveness of review panels, and they experimented with computer-assisted textual analysis given the volume of applications that they have per year. So I think they found their methods not quite acceptable, but things have advanced a lot since 2017, and I think these methods could be developed. Again, perhaps this is something Japan could do. Then also, when evaluating the implementation of these policies, agencies need to look at the number and proportion of peer-reviewed publications and other forms of literature that result from the grants that incorporated sex, gender, and diversity analysis. So to achieve this objective, funders would need to track papers and research outputs, probably by using the grant number. Through this research process, so through this review process, looking at how well they were doing, the Canadian Institutes of Health Research found two other things of interest, things they weren't really looking for. Women applicants were more likely to integrate sex and gender analysis into their proposals. Okay, that's interesting, but everyone needs to do excellent research. So everyone needs to be doing this type of research. Then they also found that applicants who scored well on the sex and gender question scored well overall and was more likely to be funded. So next steps. What's next for us in this study? So the goal of our study is to provide a roadmap to agencies for policy development and evaluation. And as an immediate next step, we will work together with colleagues globally to provide a toolkit of best practices and policies. And this will be hosted on the Gendered Innovations website, I suppose maybe in January or so. And immediately, we're working to publish the results of our study. And our other next steps, we want to continue to test our 5-part evaluation strategy. In the course of this research, we found some other aspects that maybe we need a 6th part. I'm not sure exactly. So we need to consider the financial supports agencies offered to develop this type of analysis. So people who do support developing methods for sex, gender, and diversity analysis are NIH, has a number of centers of excellence. These go to various universities. So there's a close working between the funding agency and the university. And then of course, the European Commission funded the Gendered Innovations Expert Group to develop methods in this area. That's not something we scored on. We might also consider scoring on support to include sex, gender, and diversity analysis in ongoing research. So the US National Institutes of Health, if you have a grant from them, but you haven't included sex analysis, and you should, they will give you a supplement to include that aspect. It's quite a nice strategy. And then agencies might issue calls for research in specific areas related to sex, gender, and diversity analysis. The National Institutes of Health in the US just did a call for the intersection of sex and gender in health and disease. That's an area where we need more research. So as a reminder to you, tools for sex, gender, and diversity analysis can be found in the relatively new publication from the European Commission, Gendered Innovations 2, How Inclusive Analysis Contributes to Research and Innovation. This is the outcome of the expert group that ran for 2 years that I directed. We had 25 experts from across all of the sciences. And you can find all of the information, of course, on the Gendered Innovations website. So the goal of Gendered Innovations and the goal of all of these policies for funding agencies is to add value to research by ensuring excellence in science and technology, and to add value to society by making research more responsive to social and environmental needs, and also to add value to business by developing new ideas, patents, and technologies. So if you're interested in this kind of research, you can sign up for the newsletters that I send about once a month that gives very current research in this area. So thank you very much for your attention.